Welcome to Talking Tactics, a podcast that gets you results. Each episode features a single tactic implemented with limited resources that moved the needle in enrollment in some way. I'm your host, Day Kibbilds, Strategy Director at Ology, a marketing and branding agency for education. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the most clever folks in admissions and enrollment marketing, doing the work day to day, just like you. Talking Tactics is a part of the Enrollify network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites, linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Check them out at element451.com. Hello, everyone. Happy new episode day. I'm Day, your host, and with me today is Celine Kuysters from the University of Antwerp. Celine is here to talk to us about how her university's podcast, called Profcast, has brought them a ton of success. Each episode features one professor focusing on their research and on the person behind the research. Over the past 4 seasons, the series generated over 27,279 listens in 31 countries. But before we jump in to talk about that tactic, I want to tell you a little bit about Celine. She is currently the marketing and communication strategist at the University of Antwerp. She started her career in higher education in 2019 with master's degrees in both strategic communication and journalism. She's responsible for managing international recruitment strategy, digital campaigns, content creation, and social media, and she's committed to building the university's alumni community. Since 2022, she's a part of the EFMD, that's the European Foundation of Management Development Marcom Group, in the Alumni and External Relations Steering Committee. And since 2023, she's also part of CASE Europe's Newcomer track, which we're big fans of. Her nickname at work is Celine International, which I just love, by the way, because she has traveled to 33 different countries and she speaks 5.5 languages. Just incredible. Welcome to the show, Celine.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. Feels a bit meta, though, talking about a podcast in a podcast, but super excited.
It is meta. We might be, breaking down the matrix right now.
Exactly. So that's what we're aiming for.
Celine, I'm curious, what are these 5.5 languages?
Oh gosh, well, so basically my native language is Dutch or Flemish, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And then in school we also get French, German, and English. I took up some Spanish, and now the next on the list is Italian, but things get mixed up in my head. So I think I'll be stuck at 5.5 probably.
So does the half change depending, or is the half one of the languages?
Well, yeah, I'll say Italian, but it does change depending on my mood a little bit, so...
It does, right? Yeah. So I feel like, between Spanish, French, and Italian, if you just really change your hand gestures and accent, you could probably swing it.
Exactly. Especially after a bit of sangria or after limoncello, things get better. So
how fluent. I'm so fluent.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. All right. Well, we're here to talk about Profcast, although I would love to talk to you about your life. Maybe we can dedicate another episode to that one day. Take us back to the very beginning of this idea that you had. Why was this podcast created? What problem were you trying to solve?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think it was during a time where a lot of people were trying to get creative, being COVID, of course, during the pandemic. As probably for a lot of higher education marketeers, we were a bit stuck as in what do we do? Our info days can't really happen anymore. Our events fell through. So it became quite obvious early on that we needed to get creative and do something a bit more outside of the box. And for us as well, for me and my colleague, who I'll mention later because he's actually the founder of the Profcast, I'm only building on his legacy a little bit. But yeah, so we've been in the job a few years now. We know the recruitment cycle. So we decided we wanted to do something new. And that's basically when the idea of Profcast was born, so to speak. And the angle also sort of came out of the pandemic situation where we really wanted to target both our students, our current ones, but also prospective students our alumni and our general community, our staff, and etc. That's basically how it started. And then we just worked on from there, really wanting to highlight our professors, their academic expertise, their research, and try to link that as well to current events. So as you can imagine, the first few episodes were pretty much all about COVID. We talked about the transportation of the vaccines, etc. But we also went a bit further than that, talking about sustainability, inflation, and so on. And we found that this specifically worked quite well within the research community, because the professors themselves, they tended to really share their episodes via their social media, etc. So their academic network was also exposed. So I think that was maybe the first sort of problem we wanted to solve, is like, how do we continue to spread our academic research and expertise? And then secondly, of course, what we also wanted to do was show the person behind the professor. Because I remember, like, I studied at the University of Antwerp as well myself, and my first class was statistics. I failed miserably. 6 out of 10. Not a good experience. But I just remember walking in this auditorium and sitting there with 400 other people, and I had no idea who my professor was. Honestly, also not what he was talking about, but that was probably my fault more than the professor's. So I think that's also something that we wanted to do, because we couldn't really have prospective students come to the campus anymore. We wanted to introduce them to their professors and sort of show the person behind the professor. So, and I think that actually worked quite well, because I think people often, they don't just go to a podcast for learning purposes. They also want to have a bit of a human touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we had this episode, for instance, with one of the professors. He teaches change management, but he also has 3 young kids at home. So he really focused the episode a bit around like how you are the change manager of your life with 3 young children. And I think those things work really well and stick better than just the dry information. So
just the informational ones. I can imagine this professor's episode, if it happened during COVID with 3 young children, that's an episode to listen.
Exactly. Unfortunately, that one is in Dutch. We have a bit of a mixture between English and Dutch, but if it's up to learning Dutch, like, highly recommend.
Yeah, that can be our half language, everyone.
Exactly.
So what I find really interesting about this concept is there's a couple of things that are a little bit different about it. The fact that it's really helping with academic reputation, so that professors are being featured, but also this idea of making them human, because we know, I mean, that's a really effective thing. It's something that our prospective students and current students are craving. Like, you're hitting so many goals with this single idea. And also it's content that doesn't disappear right away, right? Like, this is content that lives on for a long time and that you can reuse snippets of. And that's just, it's definitely out of the box.
Yeah.
Also checking money boxes. Very good.
Yeah, no, but exactly. I think a lot of times, like, a lot of us working in higher education are involved in in different fields, and creating content that is sort of that lasts is something that's very valuable, because often, especially if you look at TikTok, for instance, or Reels, like, everything is so short-lived. But a podcast is something that you can actually, we have one of our professors who has it in our email signature. So, and that has been the case for 3 years now. So I mean, it works. Like, it does have a longer lifespan, I would say, than a lot of content you create.
So how did you and your kind of your partner in crime here, your co-founder of the podcast, how did you decide a podcast was the way?
So to be honest, I wasn't really involved in the start of the Profcast. So it was basically my former colleague Lothar. So all credits to him for the idea. I actually asked him before this episode, like, how did you create, like, why the Profcast? And he said, well, I don't really remember. I only remember being on a train and just sort of drawing on my phone, like in a paint app, and he drew the logo of Profcast. And then so it kind of originated.
It happened.
It just kind of happened. No, but I think that's also something, if I talk about the Profcast, what I would recommend for us, it was something that, because we already spent a few recruitment cycles really optimizing our marketing strategy in recruiting students, we had a bit of room, like, because the priorities were all set, like the need to haves were there. And then now we just had some extra space to have some nice to haves. And of course, podcasts being such a popular medium, I looked it up prior as well. There's 5 million podcasts out there. Like, it's such a big booming business, and it keeps growing every year. So definitely as well in higher education in our country, for instance, we couldn't really find that many examples of podcast series. So we also kind of saw an opportunity to do something that maybe other people weren't already doing as much. I think that's basically like, I wish I could give like a pinpoint as to when it like really originated, but yeah, let's just say on the train.
On the train, somebody, go on transit, take a trip, and you'll get this magical idea. So what I like the idea of podcasts and audio in general, because I know my 15-year-old nephew spent a year with us here at my home in Canada. And the entire day, 24 hours, maybe even while he was sleeping, he always had one AirPod in his ear, just one headphone or earphone. And there was always something playing in there, always. Yeah. He was living life. He was with us. He was eating. He was cooking. He was doing the dishes, like watching TV with us. But there was this other audio stream always happening. And hey, why not get to know your professors for the school that you're interested in?
Exactly. And like you said, because your 15-year-old nephew, like it's the target group, it's the demographics. Like it's the group that really listens to these and that can absorb multiple means of communication at one time. So it's definitely something that I think it's not just about TikTok these days. Like these kids, they actually also listen to podcasts,
long form content. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, I do have to say, like when it comes to the actual recruitment part of it, because I think that's also a very important, or a question I get often, like do you actually see people converting because of this podcast? And it's a little bit more tricky to actually pinpoint it as it is in general in higher education marketing, because you have so many touch points during a student journey. But I had individual cases of students coming up to me saying, well, prior to coming here, I was listening to the Profcast and I'm super happy because now I know my professor a little bit. And even if it's just these individual cases, like it can be super valuable.
So, all right, for our listeners who are now convinced, they're booking their train tickets so they can draw the logo. How did you make it happen, or how did you take it on? What was the procedure to get an episode recorded, produced, and out into the world?
Yeah, and actually, that's one thing I love about this podcast as well, is that it's the focusing on the doing it yourself, because I think that was a bit of our strategy throughout the entire project. Like we wanted to do as much as we could in-house. Because we did not have big budgets. Like it was not something that we created the idea on the train and then we would spend thousands of dollars or euros to an external agency to create this. So basically what we did is just research. We just Google and we went out to search equipment, like the technology, and we ended up spending around 1,000 euros on microphones, on a mixing panel, on the licenses you need, the subscriptions to the platforms. And from there on, we just watched hours of YouTube and just really learning. Just experimenting. And probably as you know as well, like it isn't rocket science. Like you make mistakes. I plugged in wrong microphones. My sound wasn't connected. Like we made the mistakes, but in the end, like people forgive if the content is well enough. From there on, we just really started experimenting, started trying. We made an episode about me turning 30 and how I felt about it. That was our test episode. We deleted that recording, by the way. It is nowhere to be found online.
Like we're looking that one up. I mean, 30 years old, 33 countries. I think,
it's doable.
Great.
Yeah. So
yeah. So how do you recruit the professors and how do you prepare them for an episode?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, it was tricky because it was a new format and people were very skeptical. They were like, what's the Profcast? And I don't want to be on there. And what's it going to be? And I'm being recorded. And what if I say something wrong? In the beginning, people were very, very skeptical. And it took some convincing. But then the funny thing is, like, when we entered our fourth season, there were actually people coming up to us saying, well, I haven't had my episode yet. So when am I going to be on the Profcast? So there was really this kind of like, well, it's my turn now. I need to have my episode. So I think in that case, like in the beginning, it was tough convincing sometimes. But then I think what's also important is just making your guests feel comfortable, welcome, like you've done. And we obviously sent them a few questions in advance. And being professors, like they are used to speaking, they're used to talking about their expertise and their knowledge. I think it was often the questions about more their personal life, their personal experience that they were sometimes a little bit anxious about, but in general, usually it went quite easy, and especially because it's a medium where you can also cut and paste a little bit. So worst comes to worst, like we did give them an opportunity to correct errors if need be. So in general, it went quite smoothly. Yeah.
Hey, it's Day here, and I want to personally invite you to the industry's hottest event this summer, the Engage Summit, hosted in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th. The Engage Summit is your roadmap for AI readiness in higher education. Sessions will focus on cutting-edge AI applications that are reshaping student outreach, enhancing staff productivity, and offering deep insights into ROI. This is not your typical conference. It's a strategic summit where you'll learn from the best about leveraging AI and digital strategies in higher ed marketing. Imagine 2 days filled with hands-on sessions, real success stories, and the chance to network with top minds in the field. You'll leave with practical, transformative takeaways as you learn how AI fosters a more personalized, efficient approach from recruitment to student success. Oh, and the best part? The Engage Summit is incredibly affordable. Use the discount code Enrollify50, that's 50, and you can register for just $99. So, join your favorite Enrollify network creators at the Engage Summit this June. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there. Did you have a challenge at all with them maybe speaking too academically for the channel where you had to ask them, hey, actually, could you explain that to someone who doesn't know what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's honestly, it happened. And especially because sometimes like you go in this explanation and because it could be about really complicated matters and then it would be an answer to a question which could last like 15 minutes and you don't want to interrupt, of course. So that is something we did struggle a little bit with. But at the same time, we also didn't necessarily want to restrain that because we also wanted it to appeal to an academic audience as well and to really highlight their expertise. So I think it was more of an issue of us having to really prepare quite well in advance, like what we wanted to know out of the professors, like what information we wanted to highlight. And that's also why in advance it took quite some time to prepare those questions. But then once the actual episode aired, like usually it all worked out.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Talk to me about any challenges that you and your team faced. Were there any hurdles? Were there any approvals? Roadblocks?
Yeah, it's. I think actually when it comes to approvals, we're in quite a good position as we do have a lot of trust from management. So there was never really this mistrust towards us doing the podcast series, especially because it was quite low investment. Like if you look at it, we did invest around 16 hours work per episode, which is quite a lot, but we did everything ourselves, like from the preparation to the actual editing. So it does take some time. But besides that, it didn't really. We didn't really need a lot of budget. So from management, we really got a go quite early on and they really see the value and want us to explore other options as well beyond the Profcast. So that actually went quite well. Other challenges, as I mentioned, I think some of the professors did require some work before they wanted to come up and talk to us. But besides that, to be honest, it all went quite smoothly. The only thing for me personally, so when I took over on the 4th season, and I misplaced my microphone so that my sound wasn't recorded.
Yeah.
I had to re-record all of my questions, and that took some voice acting, which I'm not very good at. So I was really at home with my microphone being like, that's so interesting. Oh, wow. And you're just laughing to yourself, which was kind of strange. But
yeah.
I hope people didn't notice. Like no one came up to me yet and said, well, that sounded a little bit off, but no, so I think that worked out quite well.
That's less problem solving for you. Even voice acting, that's what we have to do nowadays.
I know, we're marketers, we have to do a little bit of everything. So
yeah, we do. All right, so talk to us about results. I know you mentioned a couple of things already that some students have mentioned it to you. Professors are putting it in their email signature, which I love. What are some of the results that you're super proud of?
Well, I think for us, one that you mentioned in the beginning as well, like we did the analysis recently and we found out that we had listens from over 31 different countries, which for us was amazing because most of the episodes are in Dutch. We wanted to give our professors the opportunity to speak in the language that they were comfortable in. But then the minority of the episodes that were in English really did have a reach that was beyond Belgium. So we really, really like that. And if you look at the number of listens, like we know we are quite niche. So we really appeal to an audience that is quite narrow. We appeal to our students that are already interested in us, the current students, the staff, the alumni, but still managing to sort of gather those 27,000 listens.
Yeah,
that to us was, we were super happy about that. But of course, like coming back to the beginning, it is a little bit tricky to really pinpoint, like, was it worth it? For me, I love the experience. You also get to know your professors a lot better. It's such a fun medium, and it is very timeless, as you mentioned. So it is definitely something that I would do again. But it is it's not like you're doing a digital campaign and you have these very tangible results on
right.
Like the ROI is very, very difficult to determine. But yeah, I would still definitely do it again. And I think from our part, we're still quite happy with the results that we generated. So
yeah. I mean, there's definitely these kind of intangible reputation things, right? Like first of all, I think, I'm not quite sure what the stat is, but I think most podcasts don't make it past like 1,000 listens or something like that. So that already alone for an academic podcast is very impressive. And then, 31 countries means a lot of schools are trying very hard to establish their reputation abroad, to support their international recruitment, to get their faculty members known and noticed or support in that. So all of these things are, yes, they're a little bit intangible, but they're in everybody's strategic plan, right? So it's just a really interesting way to support that from a marketing office. And not to mention that, right? Like that partnership with your central marketing office and your communicators on campus, and the fact that a faculty member has this podcast on their email signature, that kind of vote of confidence and faith in the work that you do. I know that's also another really important thing universities want. So there's a lot of like really just great things happening as a result of Profcast.
Exactly. And I think that's a very important topic that you touch as well. And it goes beyond just us. Like we're inspiring students. We have students coming up to us, actually borrowing our material, doing their own podcast series that are about the university or about talking to alumni. And it's super fun to see that something can trigger them to actually create content for us. And of course, we're super stoked about that as well. And that's why I would honestly recommend every higher education institution to just sort of get started with it. It's such a fun medium, and you can get so creative with it. And once you have the flow a little bit it's not rocket science, but it can be a bit daunting if you don't know where you have to start or what you have to do. But it's 100% worth it, I would say.
Well, Celine, it's not just you that are Celine International. Your podcast is international too.
Sounds great, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should maybe change the name to like Pod Planet.
Maybe for the next, because I don't think maybe we need a rebranding or.
I mean, and just to be clear, everyone, it wasn't just Celine playing the podcast on the 33 countries that she's visited. These are legitimate 31 countries, other people listening, right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this tactic with us. I think it's just a really cool idea and great execution. Can folks find the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Spotify,
100%. We've pushed it to every platform available, every social media channel available. So it shouldn't be that hard to find.
It shouldn't be hard. We'll link it in the show notes, and if you want to try your Dutch, everyone, or find the English episode so you can kind of understand what we're talking about.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you for being here. And to our listeners, thank you once again for listening to another episode of Talking Tactics. This one can really help you reach audiences wherever they are and really boost the reputation of your faculty. Until next time, keep walking the walk and talking the tactic. The Talking Tactics podcast is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions pros find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Jenny Lee Fowler, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed too. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Check them out at element451.com.